When the moon is high and the stars are bright, gather round, it's Halloween night. Cozy up, friends, for some spooky delight, swinging through the Halloween night.
Good evening, all you night owls, restless souls, and curious ghouls out there. You're tuned into Spooky Radio's Haunted Harmony Hours with your host, the one and only Jack Lantern.
Ghosts and goblins, all in fun, with a vintage swing, the night's begun. Tap your feet and join the fright in our swinging Halloween night.
Tonight, we're diving deep into the hallowed grounds where the moonlight casts long shadows and the silence is anything but peaceful. That's right, folks. Tonight's theme is graveyards, cemeteries, and all the restless spirits who call those haunted places home. We've got a killer lineup of songs, stories, and, of course, a special guest who knows more than a thing or two about the dark arts of the graveyard. So grab a shovel, pull up a headstone, and let's dig in, shall we? Tonight, we'll be serenading you with some bone-rattling tunes like They're Coming to Get You, Barbara, a song that's as spine-tingling as the film that inspired it, and Skeletons, Oh Yeah, which, I must say, never fails to get me in the mood to dance. If only I had more than just bones to shake. And that's not all. We've got some chilling stories to share, including one about a midnight dare gone horribly wrong, and another that might just make you reconsider what it means to be buried alive. But before we get into all that, let's kick things off with a little homage to one of my all-time favorite films, Night of the Living Dead. Y'all remember that iconic scene where Johnny teases poor Barbara with the line, "They're coming to get you, Barbara."
In the grave the nights will spill, with the wind in the trees and a cold little chill. Oh, Barbara, can't you see the moon? The shadows are dancing, they're coming for you soon. Ooh, Barbara, they're coming for you soon. Coming to get you, Barbara. They're rising up from the ground. They're coming to get you, Barbara. Better run, better not make a sound. The tombstones are leaning and the crypts are to creep. Oh, Barbara, don't you feel weak? The dead are waking, their eyes open wide. Barbara, there's nowhere to hide. Ooh, 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 ooh. Coming to get you, Barbara. They're rising up from the ground. They're coming to get you, Barbara. Better run the line, make a sound. What if the dead are really coming for you? They're coming to get you, Barbara. They're rising up from the ground. They're coming to get you, Barbara. Better run, better not make a sound.
That one always gets me, just like Johnny got Barbara. Am I right? And that's what inspired this first track of the night. But don't worry, folks, you're not alone out there. Or are you? Speaking of the dead coming back for a little fun, that scene got me thinking about my top 3 graveyard movies. Let's start with number 3, Pet Sematary. Now that's one film that really makes you think twice about burying anything in the ground, don't you think? Those animals sure don't come back the way you remember them. Number 2 on my list has to be The Crow. I mean, a rock star coming back from the dead to avenge his own murder. Now that's what I call poetic justice. And the cemetery scenes, oh, they're just dripping with atmosphere. You can almost feel the fog curling around your ankles, can't you? But the top spot, my friends, goes to the one, the only Night of the Living Dead. It's the granddaddy of them all, the film that taught us that sometimes the scariest things are the ones that should have stayed 6 feet under. It's a masterpiece of tension and terror, and that opening graveyard scene is the stuff of nightmares. Now that we've taken a stroll through the graveyards of cinema, let's keep the party going with a little something to rattle your bones. This next tune is for all you night owls who just can't sit still when the moon is full and the spirits are out. Here's Skeletons. Oh yeah, get ready to shake those bones, folks.
In the graveyard late at night,
Oh yeah, oh yeah,
the skeletons are out of sight,
oh yeah,
dancing by the pale moonlight.
oh yeah,
They're giving everyone a fright. Oh yeah, oh yeah, jump in the grave, rock your bones. Skeletons dancing all night long. Jump in the grave, feel the fright. Rock those bones until the morning light. They rattle and they clatter, making a spooky sound.
oh yeah,
Bony feet tapping on the hollow ground.
oh yeah,
Skulls are grinning and they're swirling round.
Oh, yeah.
Ghostly shadows dancing all around. Oh yeah, jump in the grave, rock your bones. Skeletons dancing all night long. Jump in the grave, feel the fright. Rock those bones until the morning light. Watch them shimmy, watch them shake. Dancing skeletons on a ghostly break. With the clickety-clack, they groove and sway. In the graveyard every Halloween day. Tombstones shaking to the rhythm's beat.
oh yeah,
Bony hands clapping, never missing a beat.
oh yeah,
Zombies and ghouls can't help but compete. Oh, the title of the spookiest feat. Oh yeah, jump in the grave, rock your bones. Skeletons dancing all night long. Jump in the grave, feel the fright. Rock those bones until the morning light. So if you hear a rattle and a spine-chilling sound,
oh yeah,
know the skeletons are dancing underground.
oh yeah,
Join the fun if you dare to be found.
oh yeah,
In the graveyard where the spooky beats pound. Jump in the grave, rock your bones. Skeletons dancing all night long. Jump in the grave, feel the fright. Rock those bones until the morning light. Jump in the grave, ha-ha, rock your bones. Let's dance, skeletons, hauntingly good time.
I tell you, those skeletons sure know how to throw a party. Who says the afterlife has to be all doom and gloom? Sometimes a little midnight boogie is just what the doctor ordered. Well, that, and maybe a good exorcism. But before we get too carried away with all this dancing, let me tell you a little something about what's coming up next. We've got a story that'll make you think twice before taking a dare, especially if it involves a graveyard at midnight. Stay tuned because this one is bound to give you chills. You are tuned in to WHLW and you're listening to Spooky Radio's Haunted Harmony Hours. We'll be right back.
Graveyard glow for that eternal show. Wherever you go, let your spirit glow.
Are you looking to keep that ghostly glow long after the sun sets? Look no further than Graveyard Glow Elixir. Made from the finest ectoplasm and moonlit dew, our elixir gives your skin that otherworldly radiance you've been dying for. Just one sip, and you'll be glowing like a full moon on Halloween night. Perfect for late-night haunts, moonlit strolls, or simply dazzling your ghostly friends. Graveyard Glow Elixir, because in the afterlife, you deserve to shine.
Wherever you go, let your spirit glow.
Welcome back, night owls, to WHLW Spooky Radio, where the only thing we take seriously is the scare. It's time to dim those lights, huddle under a blanket, and prepare yourself for our first story of the night. This one's a real spine tingler, folks, and it comes with a warning. Never take a dare you aren't prepared to finish, or more like if you aren't prepared for it to finish you. That doesn't make much sense, does it? Let me tell you about Samantha. She's the kind of girl who never backs down from a challenge, always needing to prove she's braver than anyone else. So when her friends dared her to place a rose on the oldest grave in the town cemetery at midnight, well, how could she resist? But what started as a game quickly turned into a nightmare that none of them saw coming. This is The Confession.
So, I need to tell you something, but you have to promise not to tell anyone else, okay? It's about Samantha. You know, the dare we did last week. The one where she had to go to the cemetery at midnight. It was supposed to be just a stupid joke. But now, I don't know what to think anymore. So it was last Friday night, and we were all hanging out, being dumb, like we always are. Someone, I think it was Jordan, dared Samantha to go to the cemetery by herself. You know how she never backs down from a dare, right? She's always been the bravest out of all of us. So of course she said yes. The dare was simple. She had to walk to the oldest grave in the cemetery, put a rose on the headstone, and then come back without looking back. Easy, right? We even joked about how it was no big deal, that it would be over in 5 minutes. But something changed when she got there. She didn't even flinch as she walked through the gates. The rest of us stayed behind, just outside the cemetery, watching her go. It was so dark, the only light was from the moon, and it cast these long, creepy shadows over everything. I remember thinking it looked like the graves were reaching out to her, but I didn't say anything. Samantha went straight to the oldest grave, the one we all know about, the one with the worn-down angel on top. She bent down, put the rose on the grave, and then she just stood there for way too long. I thought maybe she was trying to scare us, you know. But when she finally turned around and started walking back, she looked different. I don't know how to explain it, but it was like she was trying not to run, like she was holding something back. When she got back to us, she didn't say a word. She just grabbed her stuff and started walking home. Fast, we all laughed it off like, "Good job, Samantha, you're so brave." But she didn't laugh. She didn't even smile. I figured she was just trying to stay in character, you know, like she was too cool to be scared. But then, the next day, she told me she heard footsteps behind her, all the way home. She said it started as soon as she left the cemetery, like someone was walking right behind her. But when she looked over her shoulder, there was no one there. I told her she was just freaked out because of the dare, that it was all in her head, but she swore she heard them. Real, heavy footsteps, like someone was right on her heels. I didn't think much of it at first, but it didn't stop. Every day after that, she'd tell me the footsteps were getting louder, like they were getting closer. She said it was almost impossible not to look back, but she didn't. She said she couldn't. Because if she did, she knew she'd see something she didn't want to see. By the end of the week, she was a wreck. She hadn't slept in days. She was jumpy, paranoid. I could see it in her eyes. She was terrified. I kept telling her it was just her imagination, that she needed to calm down, but what if it wasn't? What if something really was following her? And now, she's gone. No one's seen her for 2 days. Her parents have been calling everyone, but it's like she just disappeared. I can't stop thinking about those footsteps. What if they finally caught up to her? What if whatever was following her finally took her?
And that, dear listeners, is why you should never underestimate the power of fear, poor Samantha. But sometimes we have to face the darkness to understand what's truly lurking within it. If that story gave you chills, why not give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and follow us on social media. And don't forget to tell your friends about spooky radio. After all, there's safety in numbers, or so they say. We've got plenty more frights in store tonight, but first, let's take a break from the terror with a tune that's equal parts spooky and groovy. Here's Dance of the Spirits, a jazzy number that'll have you tapping your feet while keeping one eye over your shoulder.
The ghosts, they start to dance. In the moonlit graveyard, they start to dance. With every twirl and prance, they take a chance on life beyond our sorrow. They live it up, you see, in the twilight endlessly. More fun you've ever seen in their world of mystery. The Spirits they all cheer with every passing night. They raise a cheer. There's no more pain or fear, just joy premier as dawn begins to follow. They live it up, you see, in the twilight endlessly. More fun you've ever seen in their world of mystery. Beneath the willow tree you see specters glide so gracefully in the night. With laughter and delight they revel in their afterlife's fight. They live it up, you see, in the twilight endlessly. More fun you've ever seen in their world of mystery.
Nothing like a little jazz to keep the spirits lively, right? And speaking of lively, let's not forget that all subscribes and shares you're sending our way are what keeps spooky radio alive and kicking, or should I say, haunting and howling. So keep spreading the word, folks. The more the merrier, especially when it comes to the undead. Now it's time to slow things down with a lament that's sure to tug at your heartstrings, assuming you still have one. This next song is a somber reminder of the souls who lie beneath the earth, waiting for the warmth of a visitor who never comes. Here's Beneath the Old Oak Tree. Listen closely, and you might just hear the whispers of the forgotten.
Down beneath the lonely oak tree, the shadows whisper secrets in the night. They buried me where no one could see, under the soil, far from the light. The roots, they hold me tight and free. In this grave the silence bites. Oh, what lies beneath the tree? Oh, beneath the old oak tree. The wind, it howls a mournful tune. Branches sway like ghosts in flight. The moon reveals my secret doom as stars bear witness to my flight. Each passing hour feels like my tomb in this eternal, endless night. Oh, what lies beneath the tree? Oh, beneath the old oak tree. Time stands still where shadows creep, silent whispers, secrecy. Underneath where darkness weeps, in this place forever sleep. Oh, what lies beneath the tree? Oh, beneath the old oak tree.
There's something so hauntingly beautiful about that one, isn't there? It makes you wonder what stories the trees could tell if they could talk, or perhaps they're talking all the time, and we're just not listening closely enough. But don't get too comfortable, my friends, because we're just getting started. After the break, we'll be welcoming a very special guest to the show. She's wicked, she's wise, and she knows a thing or two about the secrets of the graveyard. That's right. Mrs. Tuggle is back, and she's ready to share some of her most spine-tingling tips on graveyard magic. You won't want to miss this. You're tuned in to WHLW Spooky Radio, where the dead never sleep. We'll be right back after this short break.
For rest, that's truly grand. Choose Phantom's Choice, best in the land.
Rest in peace, but do it in style with Phantom's Choice coffin linens. Our linens are crafted from the softest, most luxurious silk, woven with care to ensure an eternal slumber that's truly divine. Whether you're a new arrival or just updating your afterlife decor, Phantom's Choice offers the comfort you crave. Available in a variety of eerie shades like midnight black, ghostly gray, and blood red. Because when it comes to your final resting place, why settle for anything less than perfection? Phantom's Choice Coffin Linens, for the discerning spirit.
For rest, that's truly grand. Choose Phantom's Choice, best in the land.
Welcome back, all you lovely listeners of WHLW Spooky Radio. And if you've been with us before, you know we're always thrilled to have special guests who bring a little extra chill to the night. And tonight, we've got a returning favorite, none other than the one, the only, Mrs. Tuggle. Now, if you're new around here, let me warn you, Mrs. Tuggle is no ordinary guest. She's a witch with centuries of experience in the dark arts. And tonight, she's here to share some, let's call them unique tips on graveyard magic.
Why, thank you, Jack. Always a pleasure to return to this little haunt of yours. I've been brewing up some rather ghastly advice for your listeners tonight, especially those with a penchant for the macabre.
We wouldn't expect anything less, Mrs. T. So what do you have for us? I hear you've got some tips for making ghosts do your bidding.
Oh yes, Jack, I do indeed. Let's dive right in, shall we? My first tip for all you budding necromancers out there: if you want a ghost to do your dirty work, you must start by collecting a handful of dirt from their grave. But beware, it's not as simple as just digging it up. You have to wait until the stroke of midnight on a moonless night, and make sure you don't breathe while you do it, or you might just invite the spirit right into your own lungs. And trust me, dearies, you don't want that.
Now that's some top-tier advice, although I have to say, Mrs. Tuggle, the whole not breathing part might be a bit tricky for some of our listeners, but hey, it's all in the name of spooky fun, right?
Indeed, Jack. And speaking of fun, here's another little trick for those looking to control a particularly troublesome ghost. Take a piece of their burial shroud, just a tiny scrap will do, and place it under your pillow, but make sure to speak to the spirit's name 3 times before you sleep. When you wake, they'll be bound to your will, at least until sunrise.
Ah, so you're saying it's a temporary arrangement? A ghostly temp worker, if you will? I can't imagine they're too pleased about that.
Oh, they'll do what they're told, Jack. But be warned, if you're not careful, you might find yourself being haunted by a rather angry spirit when the sun comes up.
Fair enough, Mrs. T. Last thing we want is a disgruntled ghost clocking in for overtime. What's your final tip for our brave listeners?
The last tip is a bit more personal. If you want to truly control a ghost, you need to make them feel connected to you. And what better way than to place an offering of something dear to them on their grave? A beloved item, a favourite flower, anything that reminds them of their life. But here's the twist. Once they're under your control, make sure you keep that item close. If it ever gets lost or destroyed, the ghost will be free to exact their revenge, and they won't be gentle.
Yikes! Sounds like high-stakes ghost wrangling to me, but then again, who doesn't like living on the edge? Or should I say, the afterlife? Now, Mrs. Tuggle, we've got some listener questions that I'm sure you'll find most entertaining. First up, one of our listeners wants to know how they can protect themselves from being followed by a spirit when they leave the cemetery. What do you say to that?
An excellent question. The key to protection is salt. Before you leave the cemetery, sprinkle a circle of salt around yourself, making sure it's unbroken. The salt will act as a barrier, keeping those pesky spirits from attaching themselves to you. But remember, once you step out of that circle, you mustn't look back, or you might just invite them to follow you anyway.
Salt, a classic, and for good reason. But what about choosing the right ghost for a spooky mission? How do you know you're summoning the right specter?
Another fine question. It's all in the history, Jack. Do your research. Find out who's buried where and what their life was like. A vengeful spirit makes for a powerful ally, but a ghost with unfinished business. Now that's where the real magic happens. If you can find a spirit with a score to settle, they'll be more than eager to lend you a hand or a haunt.
Sounds like we've got some serious ghost hunting to do. As always, Mrs. Tuggle, your advice is as enlightening as it is terrifying. Any final words of wisdom for our listeners?
Just this, Jack. Be careful what you wish for, and always, always respect the dead. You never know when they might decide to return the favour,
Words to live by, or maybe not. Thank you, Mrs. Tuggle, for joining us tonight and for those delightfully wicked tips. We'll be sure to put them to good use, if we dare. Well, folks, that was a treat, wasn't it? Or perhaps a trick. Either way, don't go anywhere, because we've got more spine-tingling stories and toe-tapping tunes coming up. But first, a quick break to let all that deliciously dark magic sink in. This is WHLW. You're listening to Haunted Harmony Hour.
Fresh as a daisy, not hazy or lazy. Crypt Keeper's freshener keeps you smelling crazy.
Is your crypt feeling a little musty? Maybe your coffin has that old, dead smell? Freshen up your eternal resting place with Crypt Keeper's Casket Freshener. Our patented formula neutralizes those unpleasant odors that can creep up on you, leaving your casket smelling as fresh as the day you were laid to rest. With delightful scents like lavender lullaby, rose rest, and pumpkin spice, your eternal home will always be inviting. Crypt Keeper's Casket Freshener, because eternity is too long to spend in a stinky box.
Fresh as a daisy, not hazy or lazy. Crypt Keeper's freshener keeps you smelling crazy.
Welcome back, my night-dwelling friends. You're tuned into WHLW Spooky Radio, where the night is always young and the spirits are always restless. It's time for our final tale of the evening. This one's not for the faint of heart. Imagine burying a friend, a loved one, and then realizing too late that something was terribly, terribly wrong. This is the story we call the Unearthly Silence.
The night was unnervingly quiet, the kind of silence that presses down on you, suffocating, relentless. Thomas sat alone in his study, staring blankly at the glass of whiskey in his hand. The fire in the hearth crackled softly, but it did little to dispel the cold seeping into his bones. He had buried Robert that afternoon, laid him to rest in the old graveyard on the hill. It should have been over. It should have been peaceful. But something was wrong. Terribly wrong. Robert, his friend, his rival. They'd been close once, but there had always been that undercurrent of competition, of tension. Robert was always one step ahead, always seemed to know something Thomas didn't. Even in death, that sense of unease lingered. Thomas had thought it was all in his head, just residual guilt over their strained relationship. But now he wasn't so sure. The evening had started normally enough. The mourners had left, the grave had been filled, and the casket covered in fresh earth. Yet, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Thomas found himself unable to focus, his mind spiraling back to the funeral, to the image of Robert lying so still in that polished coffin. Was it normal to feel so unsettled, to feel like something was left unfinished? A soft sound broke the silence, no more than a faint scratch, like the brushing of a branch against the window. Thomas stiffened, his grip on the glass tightening. The sound came again, slightly louder this time. He told himself it was nothing, just the house settling or the wind outside. But then it came again, this time from the floor beneath him. His heart skipped a beat. Slowly, deliberately, Thomas set the glass down. His hands were trembling, and he could feel the sweat gathering on the back of his neck. It was absurd, he knew it was, but the sound, it was coming from below, from the ground. It sounded like something trying to get out. He shook his head, trying to dismiss the thought. "It's just my imagination," he whispered to himself, but the words did little to calm the growing unease gnawing at his mind. Robert was dead. He had been dead when they placed him in the coffin, hadn't he? His skin had been cold, his face pale, devoid of life. Or had it? The memory was so vivid, and yet there was something off about it. Had Robert's lips twitched in a smirk, or was that just a trick of the light? Had his eyes, closed in death, flickered for just a moment? "No," Thomas muttered, standing up abruptly. "I'm going mad. He's dead, and I buried him." But the doubt was there, festering, growing with each passing moment. The scratching came again, louder, more insistent. It was unmistakable now, like nails dragging against wood, desperate, frantic. His breath hitched as he stumbled back, nearly tripping over the chair behind him. Was it real? Was it in his mind? The more he tried to dismiss it, the more it gnawed at him, a deep, primal fear that he had done something unforgivable. "Robert," Thomas whispered, his voice trembling. "Robert, are you there?" The question hung in the air, unanswered, but the scratching continued. Good God, what have we done? Images flashed in his mind, fragmented, distorted. Robert's face, deathly pale, almost mocking. The feel of the earth as they shoveled it over the coffin, the weight of the dirt pressing down, sealing Robert in. But now, as he stood in the empty room, Thomas couldn't remember it clearly. Had they really buried him, or had Robert sat up at the last moment, alive and vengeful? No, that wasn't right. It couldn't be. Could it? A terrifying thought seized him, clutching at his chest with icy fingers. What if this was all some cruel joke? What if Robert wasn't dead at all, but merely pretending, waiting for this moment to humiliate Thomas, to expose his guilt, his true feelings? Had Robert arranged it all, the illness, the funeral, the burial, just to see Thomas squirm, just to see if Thomas would betray him? "No!" Thomas shouted, his voice cracking. "No, it can't be." But the doubt, the suspicion, was there now, twisting his thoughts into dark, grotesque shapes. The sound was getting louder, more real, more substantial. It wasn't just scratching now. There was a voice, faint, barely above a whisper, but undeniably there. It called his name, a slow, drawn-out plea. "Thomas, Thomas." His blood ran cold. The walls of the room seemed to close in on him, the shadows growing darker, longer. He couldn't breathe, couldn't think. All he knew was that he had to see, had to know. Without another thought, he grabbed his coat, his hands shaking so badly he could barely button it. The door banged against the wall as he threw it open and raced out into the night. The graveyard was a mere shadow against the moonlit sky, the graves stretching out like dark, accusing figures. The wind howled through the trees, but it couldn't drown out the sound of those incessant scratches, now echoing in his mind, driving him to madness. He reached Robert's grave, his breath coming in ragged gasps, his heart pounding so hard it felt like it would burst from his chest. The grave was freshly dug, the earth still loose. For a moment he hesitated, his sanity hanging by a thread. But the noise wouldn't stop, wouldn't let him think. With a scream of desperation, he fell to his knees and began to dig, his fingers tearing at the dirt, heedless of the pain. "Hold on, Robert," Thomas panted, his voice breaking. "I'm coming to help you. Just hold on." It felt like hours, days, but finally, his hands hit the cold, hard surface of the coffin. He paused, the world spinning around him. Was he really doing this? Was he really about to open the grave? But then the sound came again, scratching right beneath his hands. His mind shattered, and with a cry he tore the coffin lid open. The silence that followed was absolute, crushing. The wind stopped, the world stopped, and all Thomas could do was stare. His mind couldn't comprehend what he was seeing, couldn't process the horror that lay before him. The air was thick, suffocating, as his breath caught in his throat. And in that moment, Thomas knew. He knew that he had never truly known Robert, never understood the darkness that lurked behind those eyes. And now he had released something far worse than death. The last thing Thomas heard before the darkness claimed him was Robert's voice, a cold whisper that echoed in his ears. "Oh, Thomas, what have you done?"
It was supposed to be a peaceful passing, a final farewell to a man named Robert. He wasn't just a friend, he was a brother in all but blood. The silence that followed was more terrifying than any scream, an unearthly silence that seemed to echo with the finality of what Thomas had done, or perhaps what he had failed to do. All right, folks, take a deep breath if you can and get ready for more music to soothe or stir your soul. We'll be right back after this short break. Don't forget to hit that thumbs up, subscribe, and follow us on all those social media haunts to keep the spooky vibes alive year-round. This is WHLW. You're listening to Haunted Harmony Hours. Welcome back, creeps and creatures of the night. It's time to shake off those chills with a little rhythm. Up next is a song that's both morbid and mischievous, just like we like it here at WHLW Spooky Radio. Here's 3 graves, but it wasn't me. Enjoy.
First there was Mary, she loved her pies divine. But one day in the kitchen she slipped on a rhyme. She hit the floor so hard I swear I heard the sound. Her pie tin took her out and now she ain't around. The folks all whispered, was it he who made the plan? But I just shook my head, said, what this man? There's 3 graves, but it wasn't me. Just a string of bad luck, can't you see? Though the town loves to say blame falls every way. Yeah, yeah. Then came dear old Ruth, riding strides of youth. But she had a curious way playing near the roof. One day she was cleaning, dusting with her broom. She lost her balance quick and faced her final doom. There's 3 graves, but it wasn't me. Just a string of bad luck, as you see. Though the town loves to say blame falls every way. Yeah, yeah. Now there's Annabelle, fell for a charm, but was allergic to my special farm. Raising accents, faith is part. But believe when I say it broke my heart. There's 3 graves, but it wasn't me. Just a string of bad luck, can't you see? Though the town loves to say blame falls everywhere.
Nothing like a little graveyard humor to lighten the mood. Now, folks, we're nearing the end of tonight's spectral soiree, but don't worry, we got one more tune before we say our farewells. But first, let me share a little advice for those of you looking for love in all the wrong places, or maybe the right ones. You see, the cemetery is more than just a place of rest. It's also where some of the most intense connections can be made. So here are my top 3 tips for finding love among the tombstones. Number 1, embrace the atmosphere. Let the stillness of the graveyard work its magic. A shared shiver is a great way to bring 2 souls together. Number 2, seek out the forgotten. The oldest, most neglected graves are often where the loneliest spirits linger. Show them a little attention and you might just find a companion who's been waiting for centuries. And finally, number 3, be respectful, but bold. Don't be afraid to strike up a conversation with a shadow or a whisper on the wind. The veil between worlds is thin, and sometimes all it takes is a kind word to spark something eternal. Just remember, love found in the graveyard might not be the kind you can bring home to meet the parents, unless they're already there, of course. All right, my dark-hearted darlings, here's our final song for the night. It's called I Found Love in the Night, and it's the perfect tune to end our evening together.
In the pale moonlight's glow, through the mist you appear. Silent whispers start to flow. In this place my heart's near. By the graveside so dear, love's begun crystal clear. I found love in the night, in the graveyard's soft light, with a ghost by my side, the love I host. Softly swaying hands touch, through the stone spirits gleam. Time and space don't mean much. In our world, love's a dream, haunting the moonlit beam. This is more than it seems. I found love in the night, in the graveyard soft light, with a ghost with a ghost by my side, the love I host. In shadows our hearts blend, eternal love won't end. Across worlds love will send, a message love won't bend. I found love in the night, in the graveyard, soft light, with a ghost by my side, the love I host.
And with that, we slowly drift towards the end of tonight's show. But before we part, let me remind you, dear listeners, that you're not alone in your love for the eerie and the macabre. We're a community of kindred spirits who find coziness in the eerie, who prefer the golden hues of fall over the bright sun of summer, and who believe that spooky vibes should be alive all year round. So here's to you, the night owls, the moon gazers, the haunted-hearted. Thank you for tuning in and making spooky radio your go-to haunt. As always, stay spooky, stay safe, and remember, the night is always darkest before the dawn, but here at WHLW, we wouldn't have it any other way. It has been an absolute pleasure to keep you company on this spooky eve. Until next time, this is Jack Lantern signing off. Good night and pleasant nightmares.
When the moon is high and the stars are bright, gather round, it's Halloween night. Cozy up, friends, for some spooky delight, swinging through the Halloween night. Ghosts and goblins, all in fun, with a vintage swing, the night's begun. Tap your feet and join the fright in our swinging Halloween night.